Welcome to The Next Interview, a podcast about careers, life, and achieving our greatest potential. And now, here's your host, Doland White.
So welcome to today's podcast. I'm Doland White. I'm the host, as the announcer mentioned, of The Next Interview podcast. And today I'm honored to have a guest with me. His name is Dave Gulas. Dave is president and co-founder of a company called the EZDC Third-Party Logistics, 3PL. And we're going to talk about, that's a lot of letters involved in this side of a company name, what the hell that means and what they do. And but it's a great opportunity to have a conversation with you, Dave. And thanks for taking time. And I'm really looking forward to some of the questions and this conversation that we have in front of us. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dolan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. And an honor. So just kind of since those who are listening to the podcast won't know you, and this is their first time that they're having a chance to meet you, if you wouldn't mind, let's just take the first couple of minutes for people to get to know you, kind of a little bit about your background. And I've got some questions about that and your journey to where you are and what you're doing today, and a little bit about your company. And then we'll kind of get into a conversation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, grew up in Michigan, just outside Detroit. Been a lifelong sales professional. Most of that is in the medical and pharmaceutical industry for about 20 years or so, where I did sales management, worked up to an executive level. And after pharmaceuticals, we founded EZDC 3PL, and our company's just about 2 years old now. And we provide warehousing, fulfillment, and transportation for e-commerce brands.
Very, very cool. And so your journey by the way, so I didn't know that you grew up just outside of Detroit. So I used to live at 9 Mile and Van Dyke. And
Okay.
So which we won't get into what that means, but and then I actually, way pre-gray hair, much younger guy, had a farm out in Imlay City. I had 80 acres and grew silage and had cows and a bunch of stuff. So don't miss Michigan. I live about a mile from the Pacific Ocean, have for many, many years, and don't miss the snow. That's one thing I don't miss about Michigan. So, but a great place to go. So it's funny to hear that you're grew up outside of Detroit. So your transition. Let's talk a little bit about, because you came from pharmaceuticals, and let's talk a little bit about your shift from what you were doing in pharmaceuticals and why third-party logistics, because it's feels kind of like a right turn in a career and something different, and especially to go do it as a co-founder and start a company from scratch and step off with that entrepreneurial mind. So I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, so I was with a company that was a distributor selling, secondary distributor selling products to independent pharmacies nationwide.
Uh-huh.
So the business model was very much, calling pharmacies, one of many secondary companies, and selling the same products, which are basically commodities, and developing a customer base through relationship and obviously the other advantages that the company you're with had.
Mm-hmm.
And did very well in that space, and was at an executive level. And then the company that I was with ended up going under. And at that time, I had a close friend in the industry that had kind of a similar, like a friendly competitor type company. So we started talking about doing something when that happened, and he had space available in Kentucky. We collectively knew numerous people that were having issues with their 3PL, where they were e-commerce sellers, and they were had nothing but complaints about the 3PL, where orders weren't shipping and poor customer service, lack of communication. And our way of doing business within the pharmaceutical industry, particularly in the secondary market, when you're competing against like Fortune 50 companies, is it's a very high touch customer service environment, to where everything's urgent, everything's going overnight. You're dealing with small business owners, and things go wrong all the time. So you're used to basically solving problems on the fly and making sure stuff goes. And even in my own experience, even though I was managing a sales team and doing purchasing and all that, I was in the warehouse every day, seeing what came in and making sure it could go back out, and constantly in touch with the warehouse people. So, from that standpoint, we thought we had a very good grasp, and a very good, potential experience base to go into logistics, particularly when we saw this gap in the market.
Yeah.
And so we jumped in and did it. And yeah, we're 2 years in now, and we've grown a bit from where we're at, and yeah, just continuing to learn, grow, evolve, and try to create the best customer experience that we can.
It's interesting you say that because I think one of the challenges that you probably face, it'd be interesting to explore just a little bit, is when you're doing third party logistics, is you're stitching together an outcome, right, that you don't own all the pieces of. So you've got, vendors and shippers and truckers and different kinds of stuff. Not that I know a lot about third party logistics, but kind of from what you've described, there's this cohort that comes together to provide an outcome. The customer needs this done, and you've got to rely on not just your facility, but people you build relationships with to get it done, that you develop trust. So how do you go about kind of keeping each of those people involved in that process happy, I guess is probably the word. You talked a lot about customer success and the difference, and I'll come back to another question later, but let's kind of start there.
Yeah, I mean, the foundation of that is just clear communication to where everyone involved knows what's expected on both sides, and then obviously following up on that and making sure that everything's executed. And that's it's a whole lot easier said than done. But that's
I can imagine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's the foundation. So, the people we benefit are, if you think about every e-commerce brand, even if they start small, fulfilling out of their house or their basement or whatever, every
Sure.
one of them reaches a point to where they graduate to outsourcing that fulfillment at some point. And some people keep it in house. They go out and they get a warehouse, they manage staff, and they continue to build that infrastructure themselves. And for those that can do that, that's great. And there are many that choose to do that, but there's a whole lot that would just rather outsource that and really focus their talents on growing the business, product development, sales, marketing, that type of thing, and just
Mhm.
outsource what can be a big headache as far as logistics. So if they don't want to rent a warehouse, they don't want to manage staff, they don't want to negotiate carrier contracts, they don't want to, get a software system to manage all that, and just have the headache of making sure everything runs smooth on a day to day with their logistics. That's where they would outsource to a company like us.
So with the different kinds of customers, it's funny because I know that we'll use, there's this little company that runs out of Washington called Amazon, right? And they've got all these warehouses kind of scattered all over the place, and they do similar things, right? You can sell stuff on Amazon, and they'll put it in their warehouse and all those kinds of things. But I think, kind of being the 3PL, it's kind of with what you're doing, it's a much more intimate relationship with your customers, with your client base, than having kind of the big behemoth. Not that we all don't buy from Amazon for one reason or another. I know generally there's something that shows up every day my wife tells me about. But um, for what, with the different kinds of clients, what kinds of brands, I mean, there is a consistency in the kind of brand, the kind of products that you guys warehouse, or is this kind of shift because that governs kind of the relationship with each of the clients as you're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it took us a minute to kind of figure that out. We really try to focus on smaller, fast moving stuff. So we have numerous brands of like beauty, apparel, nutritional
Mhm.
supplements, home goods, books, things of that nature. So that's really where we try to focus, and it's mainly people that are on Shopify, and those type of direct to consumer e-channels. That's really our bread and butter. I mean, we have some B2B business, and we have some people do Amazon and all that, but it's very much focused on direct to consumer e-commerce.
Yeah, interesting. So it's kind of I think probably one of the challenges that you face is because of that, because of the different kinds of brands, there's probably different variations in seasonality. So the ebb and flow of, to your point of the kind of the pressures of keeping things going. And I would imagine, and everything's probably relatively urgent. I need this today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right? So I mean, it's a big deal when a brand signs on with us. They put their trust in us and they send us their inventory and then they count on us to fulfill their orders, connect to their shopping carts and make sure their customers are serviced properly. So, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big responsibility and there are a lot of moving parts. So, yeah, it's very important that we execute and get things done right.
So how do one of the things you mentioned just in passing a moment ago, Dave, was communication, right? The key, the linchpin to it is communicate, and communication, has various outcomes to it. It can break pretty easily. How do you, when you're, imagine, how do you, when you're bringing that client on, how do you establish that communication pattern? Because communication becomes trust, right? When we don't hear from someone, we trust starts to erode, and then there's other emotions that come into play. So how do you manage communication with your clients to keep that customer satisfaction high like that?
Well, I mean, for me, I think I have a big advantage being that I've been in sales my whole life, right? To
Uh-huh.
where, I mean, it's what it's what it is you're constantly communicating with people in one form or another, right? So, and I was always the come in early, stay late type of put the extra effort in type of salesperson. And if people need to text and that's how they'd like to communicate, no problem. If it's email, if it's phone, now there's all sorts of chat apps, whether it's a Slack or whether it's a WhatsApp or, however people like to communicate. I always meet them where they're at and just try to, give them the best possible service I can, whether it's getting their questions answered, making sure their order gets out, making sure they have
Gotcha.
the proper information they need. So that's just easy to me, right? So I've brought that into the sales process. And then, with our team, when people come on and then they start dealing with our team, the customer service reps and the other people involved, um, we just make that part of our culture in terms of really being much easier to access and strong communication versus the industry norm because that's the number one pain point and frustration point for e-commerce brands or really for any 3PL
Really?
customer is the lack of communication. I mean, in national industry service surveys say like 60% of 3PL customers are unhappy with the 3PL and the number one reason is
Really?
its lack of communication where so many people feel like they're just a number. And
Uh,
you can look at these massive national 3PLs and so many of them and they come to us and I talk to them these people every week where they're frustrated where there's an issue and they need help and they don't get timely responses. So we really do our best to um, stand out and give stronger communication than the norm to let people know that we do value their business, we do care, we are responsive, and that if there's an issue that needs to be resolved, we can jump on it in a timely way.
yeah, that's cool. I think one of the things, for leaders that are listening that listen to the podcast, one of the lessons I think it's very cool what you said was, meet them where they are. I think a lot of companies make this mistake, and it could be it's that's an interesting statistic about the number of people who come to you and their primary driver is communication, which hooks into trust. If I'm not hearing from you, I don't know that stuff happens. Um, but to kind of, you know, go to rather than trying to beat the customer with a hammer to make them fit into your model, to adjust your model so that you're talking to them where they are, when they are, to give them the comfort so they know what's happening with their products. Because it all for them, time literally is money, right? If they're doing e-commerce and they've shipped it and they've sent it, and if it's not there within it's supposed to be, then that customer is going to be dissatisfied and it's going to be a refund or a customer complaint or a bad review or other things are going to happen. So that's a component of their growth, business growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as you're kind of growing into it, one of the things you mentioned in, kind of in our pre podcast chat is, just the kind of the growth challenges, coming into this, the things that you faced over the last couple of years, because it's, you may have had an understanding at least of the industry, but as you come into a new business, there's always that discovery when you get there, all the stuff you don't know. And then they become challenges and you've got to work through them, go around them, climb over them, whatever they are. So think it'd be really interesting just to kind of hear about some of the things that you've experienced coming in as a leader and coming in as a business co-founder and president of the company. Kind of what your experiences have been.
Yeah, I mean that like you hit it right on the head. You don't know what you don't know coming in, and you think it's going to go one way, and you get nothing but surprises, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was going to be a whole lot easier to get customers because I was so used to selling in a particular manner my whole career, and then I quickly realized as a founder in this type of industry that you have to be visible so people can find you. So I was practically invisible online when I came in here. So I had to start learning about using social media to market the business and doing that whole thing. And quickly thereafter, I started a podcast, which was completely foreign to me. Had no experience.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good idea. Started doing it. Found a way to get it done, and we've done 84 episodes in the past year or
Amazing.
so. So, and that's done wonders to help grow the business. And then yeah, as you grow, right? Once we really started getting customers and closing numerous deals, then there were all sorts of growth challenges, and we started realizing about all the things that can potentially go wrong, how having to staff properly, and then managing building teams, managing different components, personalities, schedules, et cetera, and just getting everyone to row in the same direction with the common goal of really delivering an outstanding customer experience. And it sounds great, but again, right, when you're in the trenches day in and day out, it's not easy. And but
Yeah.
again, right, you've like that's what you signed up for. So you find a way to get it done. And it's just about coming in every day and having a clear vision of what you need to accomplish and putting the work in, the reps in, and handling whatever comes up along the way.
Awesome. Because I think there's a whole point there. That's another podcast episode. We'll have to get back together and have another podcast episode just to talk about clarity and goals and coming in with that focus. So when you're, and maybe we'll get into that on this conversation. But one of the things I do want to ask you about is, coming into the role that you're in, especially being a new company and you're in growing and you've had good growth over the last couple of years. And the very first part is how do you manage you? So that means you've got to wear multiple hats. So you've got to do, manage, and lead. So you've got to do stuff, you got to manage the outcome, and then you've got to lead a business. And so how do you decide when get up in the morning, and I don't know if you drink coffee or not. I got mine sitting right here or not, but I got my cup of coffee here. Have your cup of coffee and say, okay, here's what I'm doing today, and here's how I manage me for the intention to get to this outcome. What do you do?
Well, so I've always, I guess, fortunately in this role, I've always been very structured, very into a routine. So I mean, I wake up now that we're in school. I wake up at 4:30 every morning. I have a meditation practice. I make sure I get a good workout in. Lately I've been, sauna every day, making time for that at the
Mhm.
gym. I take a nice cold shower every day. You know, heavily hydrate, eat
Yeah.
clean. So I'm very much into that. And I drop my high schoolers off early in the morning because they start early, and then I'm usually in my office, right around 8 a.m. ready to take care of business for the day. So I mean, I think leadership starts with being a good leader of yourself and, showing up on time, honoring your commitments, being on time when you make an appointment, doing what you say you're going to do. So, I mean, I think just those little things and leading by example really sets the tone for your team, your company, your culture. I mean, so that's how I approach that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's such a great statement. I didn't mean to chuckle in the middle of your statement there, but when you hit the cold shower part, dude, I can't do cold plunges. I've tried that. I have tried, and it's like, nah, I don't know what it is about that, but and it's good for you. That's good
Yeah.
for you. It is good for you. The meditation and the workout, I got you, but the cold shower thing, I'll give you a tip of the hat for that. That's a big start to the day. So
What's so funny too, because you met like So many
Yeah.
things, and I found this out with the podcast too, right? It was so scary at first, and now it's like you feel like you can do it in your sleep. But even with the shout, right? Like you know what it's like where you kind of can just drift off and lose your thoughts in like a hot shower.
Yeah.
Like literally, right? I can do that in an ice cold shower now because I've been doing it for so long. Sometimes too, if I have extra time and I'm not rushed in the morning, I'll literally be daydreaming in an ice cold shower. So I'm just like your body will adapt, and humans are very good at adapting. So if you can just get over that initial hurdle,
That's
there's
a
light at the end of the tunnel.
So I'll give you a commitment. I'll give it a whack. And you don't need an image of me in the shower, but I'll give you a commitment. And I'll take a night. I'll try that cold shower. So I'll let you know how it goes. I'll give it a whirl. So the other thing too, I think that is there's actually two other things that came out of what you were just talking about, and one is mindfulness. You talk about a morning meditation routine, and what prompted you to kind of there's a lot of theories around. There's people who say get up in the morning and use your first hour, don't do anything else, just use your first hour and go get stuff done. I happen to be one of the folks who says, have a mindful routine in the morning, meditation or something that gives you a higher state. So what led you into that, and not to get specifics in what you do, but what led you to that kind of mindfulness?
Yeah, I mean, it was just I started during the pandemic when everything was shut down and had some extra time. But I've
Uh-huh.
always been into personal development and always trying to develop new habits and be the best version of myself I could be. And so that was something that I'd heard about and heard about the benefits, and I wanted to try. And so I started, and
Good.
pretty early on, I realized the benefits to where I wouldn't lose my temper anymore, and it was much easier to. All good.
Cool. All right. You.
Yeah, so with the meditation, very early on in the practice, I realized that I wouldn't lose my temper anymore, and I just felt so much more clearer dealing with any sort of stressful situation, and it just became a habit that is like a non-negotiable for me every morning. And yeah, when you consistently downregulate your nervous system and get into that habit, I mean, it's night and day difference, right? And you see that all the time, I'm sure, with people that kind of are short fused, or they get stressed out real easy, where I've noticed when you have a meditation practice, you're able to deal with the storms of life so much better from a higher state of mind, that it's one of those things that's probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah, that's great to hear that. It's always a good transition when I know when people start into meditative practices, kind of the changes and shifts. I believe meditation connects us to a different source, and it gives us the ability to, you talked about being a student of transformation, and I've spent years working with Bob Proctor and Mary Morrissey and a bunch of the folks in transformation, and following, Think and Grow Rich, and all of the stuff right inside of transformation. And I believe that meditative state does connect us to a different power and a different vibrational state, which changes our abilities as a leader. To your point, not to lose your temper as much, so, or in a different manner, probably. Um, but the other thing that you mentioned that I don't want to lose track of, and I know we've been chatting for a while, but and that is one of the lessons you learned was an unexpected thing, was to build your own personal reputation. And I think a lot of leaders they think about when they think about reputation and brand, they think about the business. I gotta make sure I got good marketing for my company and a great website, and I got an Instagram account. I got all the stuff for the business, but there is personal reputation involved. So what kind of led you to discover that importance, and then kind of your steps, the steps that you're taking to build your own personal brand and the importance of that. So I'll kind of pose that back to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, all the stuff about the business, right, is important. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, people do business with people, right? And if you think about all the places that you do business, or you give your business to, or you spend money, so often I'm sure there's people and there's relationships involved. So really as a founder in a new business to where, it's up to me to generate the incoming leads and customers. I realized very early on. I went to a big industry trade show very early on, and I was just blown away by how much all these other companies were doing and
Yeah.
how well, the type of personal brands they had and the type of reach that they had. And I quickly realized that if I didn't change things up in a hurry, I wasn't going to be able to make any sort of penetration in this market. So, I mean, that's what it did it for me. And then once I, figured that out, I just, again, right, just like anything else, you have to take consistent, disciplined action day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, whether that's, your marketing strategy, your posting content, how you manage a funnel and a pipeline, and all those different sorts of things. And then same thing with the podcast, right?
Sure.
We kind of quickly threw it together, got the first episode recorded, it went great, and we just never stopped. And it's the same thing in terms of lining up guests, is just like managing a sales pipeline where you have to be consistent. It's much easier now where people come to me and we've built some momentum with it. But in the very beginning, it was a lot of prospecting for people to even be on my show. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the sales background came in very handy, where I wasn't discouraged by a no, and I wasn't afraid to ask people. And so all those things work together. Yeah, but at the end of the day too, I think it just comes down to your daily habits and your daily disciplines is what's going to make the biggest impact on your results.
Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of people, they're afraid of those two things. There's a fear of the ask when you're doing so, and there has to be a willingness to be imperfect. To your point, just you put the as you mentioned, you put the podcast together, and as in closing, we'll talk about your podcast, but you put the podcast together and just went and did it. Recognize the importance of it, and it's been fun as in my journey as a podcaster, relatively new podcaster, to kind of experience it. I've not done 80 episodes yet, and I see the changes in each of the episodes and different kinds of imperfections and tweaks and things that I learned. So it's the fear of it's getting past the fear of the ask and being willing to go ask somebody. And then there's the no. A lot of people I think, have a challenge with getting a no. And when I carried a bag when I was a salesperson for many years, I used to tell people, no shouldn't bother you unless it's personal. And if they tell me I'm short and overweight, then that's a different kind of no. But if it's a no for a reason, then you learn that's an okay thing, and you learn from it and you move on from there. So, um, just a kind of in passing, if people are, you had a door close, which created a door opening to start this company, right? There's always, when a door closes, another door opens. And I know there are folks that are out there that are on the precipice, and they're thinking about, hey, I would really like to do this, and they don't go do stuff. They don't take action and actually go follow their dreams. If you could think of one or two things as a word of encouragement or a word of advice for somebody in that spot, what would you tell them?
I mean, I always just like to say, like, again, like, if you have that impulse and that desire and that idea to do something, like, that came from somewhere, right? So often too, life is about just following your instincts, following your gut, and when you have an impulse to do it. And oftentimes, I try to really channel that now into, like, if I have an idea to do something and then I instantly get scared about it, like, that's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
signal to step on the gas and just do it,
Ah,
right?
great.
Because I love the quote, everything you want is on the other side of fear, right? So you just
Yeah.
you just have to, and sometimes there's nothing else to do but just force yourself to do it, to go. And when you do that, you realize that, the fear was just in your mind. Like, the only thing to fear is the fear, right?
Yeah.
Like, once you
Yeah,
push
yeah.
past that, you realize it's not that bad, and that there's a reason that you had that idea. So I would just say, I mean, just to get in the habit of taking action, even when it's uncomfortable, and you realize after the fact that, wow, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah. That's a that's great. That's great advice. I love that. Love that quote. There's a great Will Smith movie out there, a little video clip around that. God put the greatest things put fear on the God put the greatest things on the other side of fear. And it's an interesting thing. The other thing that the other quote I've become favor of lately is the harder we work on the plan, the more details we put into the plan, and it's going to be we're going to do this by the minute, the more God laughs at us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, right? Because so often things don't go as you plan them, and things do go off script, and you have to improvise, and you have to deal with unexpected situations, and that's again, right? That's what builds confidence and the ability to do that and to continue to move forward. And in fact, in spite of everything not being perfect, and just find a way to continue to make progress and get results.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when's the last time something went according to plan? If you think
Yeah.
about that, right?
Yeah. I've always been looking for something where a job that it's going to go just the way I planned my day. The days don't go the way they're planned. Even podcasts don't really go the way you plan sometimes. So,
Yeah.
so I think in closing, there's a couple things I do want to touch on. The very first thing is you've talked a little bit about your podcast. So just tell everybody a little bit about your podcast. The links will be in the show notes and all the stuff that goes along with what we do. But tell everybody a little bit about the podcast, how to find it, and kind of what you're focused on, what your goal is.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Beyond Fulfillment. So you can find us anywhere podcasts are consumed. So we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all the other audio channels. And so I started it because when I was on the founder journey in the very beginning, it was very difficult and had a lot of challenges. And I found the biggest source of learning and the biggest help that I got was conversations with other entrepreneurs and hearing directly from them how they handled situations and what they went through and struggles they overcame, etc. And
Mhm.
one day the idea just popped into my head is like, wow, if you put all these conversations that are so valuable, if you put them on a public forum, the audience could benefit, the guests could benefit, you would benefit. It'd truly be a win-win. And had no idea about podcasting or anything like that. And everything just lined up to get it done quickly. And I just started with what I had and just never stopped. And yeah, so I interview entrepreneurs about the journey and what it's like, challenges they went through, struggles they overcame. And it's something to where if you're in business and whatever kind of bit. I have a broad range of entrepreneurs that I interview, but
Mhm.
you can take these lessons and these stories that others went through, and how they overcame their struggles and challenges, and apply them to your own business. So that's really the goal and the mission of the podcast is just to provide stories that other entrepreneurs can benefit from.
Yeah, that's very cool, and we're very closely aligned in our mission for our podcasts. It is really about how do we help people be better at what they do, and take the things that we've learned and the stuff that's in our head and get it into a forum where they can listen to it on the way to the grocery store, or have a speaker while they're in the cold shower and listen to it while they're in the cold shower. The last thing is, how do people find out more about your business? About how do they find out about third party logistics and come talk to you about their products and their programs and things that they'd like to do with you? Um, I would
Yeah,
recommend that they do that.
Yeah, I mean, best way to connect with me, LinkedIn is easy. You can always find me on LinkedIn. You can go to davegulas.com. That has links to, the company and the podcast and all that stuff. Our website is EZDC3PL.com. You can find out more about us there. So, yeah, if you just Google me, all that'll come up. So not hard to find at all.
Cool. That's good. All right. So I really encourage the listeners, just if you are looking for that kind of a solution or just to connect with Dave, connect with Dave. This has been a really, really good conversation. And if you've enjoyed the conversation, please do give the podcast a like and a share and a follow. That's important. But what is important, and you hear me say this at the end of every podcast, if there are one or two leaders or executives or managers or people who have custody of other people or who may be entrepreneurs starting their own business who can learn something from the conversation with Dave today, share this podcast with them. Just two people, because our intention is to help that individual be better at what they do, what they're doing, to reduce some stress, fear, anxiety, help them with communication. There's been some really good lessons, and thank you, Dave, for that today. Some really good lessons in how to build your business and how to bring customers to where you go, where they are and not where you are. So take these lessons to heart and go share them with your clients, share them with 2 executives. On that note, thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention to the podcast. I'm Dolan. I'm the host, and we'll see you on the next interview.
You've been listening to The Next Interview. For more information about today's guest, be sure to visit the show notes. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow and be sure to join us here on The Next Interview.